Hi, everyone. Today we're going to be talking about public diplomacy. What is public diplomacy? A term that so many people use loosely around our industry, and yet there's no clear understanding of the term and its definition. I've been lucky enough to research public diplomacy and to teach it to graduate students for a very long time. And here is a definition that I typically like to share with everybody I speak to about the term public diplomacy. So here we go. Public diplomacy involves attempts by governments to establish and maintain mutually beneficial relationships with foreign publics with a very specific aim, and that is to gain support for its foreign policy objectives. So let's deconstruct this definition and really think about what it means. First of all, let's look at the actors. In my view, a lot of people disagree with this, but in my view, public diplomacy focuses primarily on governments who are trying to get people in other countries to support their foreign policy, right? So these are attempts by governments. Now, some folks out there in the public diplomacy space look at how religious organizations, NGOs, corporations try to do the same thing. But for me, pure public diplomacy, the very basic definition, focuses on governments. This is a tool of international relations. Public diplomacy is a tool of international relations, and the very purpose of it is to gain support for foreign policy objectives. So again, let's look at the key components here. So the actor here are governments. Who are they trying to establish a relationship with? Foreign stakeholders, foreign publics. But who are these foreign publics? Well, sometimes we've seen governments try to engage everybody. Like after 9/11, the United States was trying to win the hearts and minds of the Muslim world, essentially a billion plus people out there. Well, that's a very broad kind of stakeholder group. But oftentimes, public diplomacy is going to focus on a very few number of people, such as leading journalists in a country, or economic decision makers, or politicians, or other types of influencers, people who are really fundamental to the success or failure of the public diplomacy campaign. So remember, the stakeholders, the foreign publics, can be as narrow as a few people or as broad as everybody in the world. I personally believe that the more successful campaigns are much more targeted than trying to influence everybody in a country. It's just not going to work typically. All right, let's talk about foreign policy objectives. What are these? Well, these are different for different types of governments, right? Some governments are going to try to encourage foreign investment in their country or encourage people from another country to come and visit, right? So tourism, or to promote its national brands, right? So think about Korea and its strong national brands with the cars, with Hyundai, right? Or with Kia, or think about Samsung, right? So maybe the Korean government is going to try to encourage people to really trust Korean brands, right? But another country, such as Israel, may want to gain support for its foreign policy, right? They may try to shift the conversation away from one discussion, right, the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, towards Israel's startup tech companies, right? So again, different governments have different foreign policy objectives. But again, I want to bring you back to the notion that public diplomacy is a tool of international relations, right? So a lot of folks out there are talking about soft power and promoting cultural understanding and all that, and that's cool and that's great. And that's important for public diplomacy. But ultimately, those are tactics. The goal, the ultimate objective here is to gain support for foreign policy, right? And we see this all around the world. We see this in Turkey, trying to really influence people in Central Asia, or maybe in Libya, or maybe in the Muslim Brotherhood, nations where there's a lot of Muslim Brotherhood support, to support its foreign policy in different regions of the Middle East, right? We may see China trying to promote its foreign policy objectives in Africa. So all around the world, everywhere you go, different nations, different stakeholders, different objectives. Now, again, let's look at the last element, which is relationship building. Much like public relations, public diplomacy focuses on building and maintaining long-term relationships with these stakeholders. Now, this is the optimal, this is the normative situation, but a lot of times we're actually going to look at much more short-term objectives that are going to be situational, right? Right? Maybe there's a problem for a certain country regarding a very specific issue and it can be resolved in 6 months to a year. So public diplomacy campaigns can be as short as a few months or as long as 20, 30 years if you're focusing on relationship building. So these are the key elements of public diplomacy. Again, we're going to have a lot of videos about this topic, but today we're really just looking at the definition. If you have any questions, shoot me an email, shoot me a comment on Twitter, on YouTube, subscribe to the channel. I'd love to hear your comments and your feedback. Thank you so much. Have a fantastic day.